Pricing your home to sell involves careful evaluation of other comparable sales and market values. I'm Andrea, and this is Raul, and we're at the Schrader Group. So what are some factors to consider when pricing your home?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to factor. So first and foremost, we do a seller's interview. It's pretty much a guide to get me to apples, right? Because when I show up at the house, I want to be able to compare your house with all your upgrades, your extended deck, pool, patio, whatever it might be, to houses that are in comparable fashion.
So how's the market value determined?
Yeah, so the market's value is determined with a couple factors. We like to use what we call comparable market analysis. Ultimately, what that is a snapshot of what the market's doing in your neighborhood, within your zip code, within a 2-3 mile radius, because we're trying to figure out exactly what we can pull to add value to your home. It's not necessarily considered an appraisal, but I'm able to go back and dissect, what has happened through the market, whether we're looking at back 12 months, 3 months, 6 months, and just try to look at what's real for today's market.
What's a CMA?
CMA is a comparable market analysis. That is kind of what all appraisals call the Holy Grail, because they use that to figure out valuations. I use that to figure out days on market, right? Because I can look at a property and see how many days they've been on market, what kind of reductions they've done in between. But it's also comparing your neighborhood stats to everybody else around you. That way we could get an apples to apples. What is the square footage for this house? And most of the time, depending on what neighborhood we're in, we're able to find identical properties. So then all we have to do is compare the upgrades versus the other.
Okay, so what's the difference between a CMA and an appraisal?
So a CMA is kind of what our gauge is, or our guide, right? An appraisal actually is what we would use to validate property values. And what I mean by that is an appraiser's job is to meet value to the contract or exceed. So they're going to look for all the kind of comparables they can. Now, if they can't find it within our neighborhood because there's not enough comparables, they could go a little bit further out. Typically, they go 1 to 2 miles. If they have to stretch because it's a completely unique home, they'll go a little bit further out. But the appraisal is kind of like the ironclad. This is what the house is worth, and that's what the lender, lends on.
So do you recommend getting an appraisal before selling your house?
Not necessarily, because sometimes we found that if you get an appraisal beforehand, they're just meeting value based off the stats in the neighborhood, not necessarily meeting contract value price. For a unique property, a custom build, or a house that doesn't fit the normal neighborhood, dynamics, super large home, 4,000 square feet when the average is about 2,500 square feet, super large lot, some type of unique values, anything that I would call opportunity for a buyer, like a pool, a gazebo, deck, something just really wow, or, waterfront property, or, a scene of the downtown skylight. All of that, I would probably recommend an appraisal, because we're not going to be able to find a comparable that it meets, what it should be at.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages from pricing too high or too low?
Well, it depends on the market, right? So I think what we're experiencing now in today's market is people are used to the nostalgic idea that my neighbor sold their house in 12 days back in, July of 21, right? So those times are a little bit different, and what we're seeing is a little bit more of a normalization. So sometimes if you go in too high and play that, well, if we go in at 400, they come in at 400, then they want it at 380, we can negotiate in between. The problem with that is then we start to have days on market, and once we get over our average days on market, which in this area right now is about 32 days, people start to wonder what's wrong with the property. Okay. And if we get to that point, then you're actually adversely losing money on the property, because now people are going to try to throw in, lower offers just to try to get a better deal for their clients.
Once the home is listed, how long should you wait before thinking about decreasing the price?
Well, that depends on a lot of factors. Number one, what is our client's needs, right? Are they relocating? Do they have a house that's going to be built in, or completed in 2 months? We got to take all those factors into play, because my job is to maximize the value and their hard-earned equity. But the same token, we got to look at what actually makes sense to the buyer. If we're in a heated market like we are right now, to where buyers have options, if they say it's worth $295 and I could kind of justify that, we might start there, but there's a good chance that we're going to have to reduce down if we don't have the foot traffic, or we get a lot of people that walk into the home and say, well, lovely house, everything looked great, but overpriced. Lovely house, doesn't fit our needs, overpriced. If we start seeing the trend saying overpriced, that's probably a good sign for us to kind of take a reduction, and we would evaluate it at that time.
So how are estimated net proceeds figured out?
Yeah, so what I do when we go to every appointment is give the bottom line. And what I mean by that is we plug in the mortgage, we plug in the escrow, we plug in the title policy, and all the averages that kind of go into a normal transaction. We've been very fortunate to be able to be in front of a lot of sellers, so we know kind of what to see and what to expect, even averages on repairs based on the age of the house, things like that. So when I'm actually there at the table, we actually say, hey, if we sold at $295, you're going to walk away with X value. If we sold at $285, we're going to walk away at X value. And it's able to actually create a real life evaluation for the client because they know they need $90,000 to put on the new house. Mm-hmm. Right now we have a cushion about 30, 40 grand, but we know how low we can go within the means and try to maximize their equity.
Okay. Well, we hope this tips help y'all figure out what to price your home at, and please let us know if you have any questions.